Hello everybody, welcome to another Cinder video where I teach you how to make an intuitive simple carousel in vanilla JavaScript. And the idea is there's plenty of tutorials out there. I'm sure there are some on YouTube, there's libraries, there's all this crazy stuff. And I might be wrong, I'm sure there are great tutorials out there, but essentially I was working with a student and they were a little bit frustrated that some of these are, very kind of like extensive and long, and they're wondering, like, is there a better way? Like, do we really need to add pagination to a just, regular vanilla JS carousel? And I didn't think so. And so what we're kind of working with here is, similar to how Amazon has it, you can't really move far back and then you just kind of scroll through the set. We'll kind of do it a little, almost like item by item, but it's super simple. And as always, we'll kind of use the code here on Cinder to get started. So this is some boilerplate. So I will go to my VS Code, I'll paste it in, and I'll live preview it and show you what's going on. So essentially, we just have some basic CSS to set us up. And this is our carousel, all right? This is our HTML for a carousel. We have one big container that's going to house our buttons, two sets of buttons, or I guess one set of two buttons. And we have our carousel track that has all our items in it, right? So this would be that big container. These are our buttons, and this is our carousel track. Now, to kind of better see the carousel track, let's add a border to this just so we see what's going on. And we notice immediately that, okay, these are probably in display blocks. So they're kind of going over. They're not really overflowing correctly. So let's fix that. And in the tutorial, that's the first thing I do. And so if we change our carousel track, we can now say, okay, overflow hidden, right? That's to hide all those overflow elements. And let's stop it from wrapping. And wrapping is going to move it from this up and down motion to now, let's go to our carousel and close these guys out, to now it should be going in a line, but it's not because it's still display block, right? So it's hidden, it should be going in a line, it shouldn't be wrapping, but it's still display block. So let's give carousel item display inline block. And one thing that I didn't mention here, if you're going to do inline block, if for some reason HTML takes in all these spaces, like here to here, and adds this to your element. And so to get rid of this, you basically say, okay, this space on carousel track will have font size 0, but on my carousel item, I'm going to have font size something else. So let's do that. We already added this font size 0 here, and carousel item, let's go ahead and add inline block, that font size. And if you wanted to have that padding between them, the kind of margin between them, that's your 6 pixels here. You at least get to control it. If you want to see what happens when you get rid of this font size, okay, see how it juts out? I'm going to get rid of this margin and prove it to you. It still juts out, and it juts out because of simply only that space between these guys right here. So in order to ignore that, let's go ahead and add in font size 0. Then you have to recreate the font size here and give it a margin of 6 pixels so you can space it out here. And okay, we have a carousel with CSS, but obviously nothing happens. And so let's start moving stuff and let's start actually getting functionality. Now, core to this functionality, we need something to happen in JavaScript. And so when I click on this, a function should run. So super easy. Let's add an on-click element to both of our buttons to move the carousel backwards or forwards, right? So this is as declarative as it gets. And so I'm going to update my HTML code here so that I have an on-click handler that will move my carousel backward or forward. And let's add that function to our script. All right. Now, before I add the function, let's think about how we're going to move this. Okay, how are we going to move this? We could move the whole window over. That probably wouldn't work. We want to move this A over to where B is, B over to C. And so how about we translate A and B and C all over a certain amount? And if you wanted to do this, maybe you'd say, okay, I'm going to translate 20 pixels, carousel item. And let's just start with carousel item A. So let's go A and make that hashtag A. If I transform A, look at what it does. It just moves into B, right? And we don't want to do that. It moves right into B. So what we really need to do is we need to move everybody. We need to move A to B, B to C, kind of like that, right? So let's translate everybody 20 pixels over. If you notice, a positive value pulls us all over here, but really what we need to do is if we want to see D and E and F, we need to pull everything back. And so positive 20 will push us away. How about negative 20 pixels, negative 20? Oh, that pulls us back. So that's what we want, okay? So we want to apply this property to everybody to pull it back to move forward. So let's go ahead and do that. And how are we going to do that? Well, let's build that function that we just said we were going to build a second ago. And we're going to move the carousel into a direction. But for now, ignore the direction. Let's make this simple. Let's just figure out a way, can we move everybody, apply a class to everybody, that same kind of, transition. I thought that was on my clipboard. This translate X, can we apply that to everybody? And if we wanted to, here's the code for it, okay? We're going to select all the carousel items, okay? We're going to loop through them, because selecting all the carousel items, unlike in jQuery, you can't just apply one thing to the set of items. You have to loop through it and do it individually to each item. This is individually to each item. This is me looping through it, and this is me kind of saying, hey, on that element that I've just pulled on that I'm visiting in that loop, I'm going to pull it out, I'm going to style that transform, and I'm going to translate negative how many pixels. Okay, that offset is here. And so if I wanted 68 pixels, if I wanted 70 pixels, whatever, that's going to be my offset. So now when I click this, ignoring direction, okay, I can ignore direction. If I click this, I'm going to loop through all the carousel items and add this transition to our thing. Okay, and I click, and then boom, look, it just jumped over to B. Everybody got that transition. And that happened a little quick, didn't it? So if I wanted to slow this down, let's add this transition element to our carousel item. So when we do add the transform to it, it'll happen a little slower. Look at that, nice and smooth, a little slower. So this just says I'm going to animate this change over the course of 0.3 seconds, and I'm going to use this function to animate it. There's a bunch of these functions, so you can play around with that. Okay, if you click it once, everybody gets negative 68 pixels. Everyone gets pulled back to negative 68. I click again, nothing happens. They're already at negative 68 pixels. So really what we need, and if you think about this, is not 68 pixels. I need 68 pixels times 1 for the first click, 68 pixels times 2 to kind of get us into the 136 pixels like offset, and further and further and further. So we need to multiply it by the current position we're in. We need to keep track of the current position we're in, and just keep doing what we're doing. Okay, so I'm going to keep track of the position by doing position equals 0. I'm going to increase the position using a global variable, right? So there's a global variable, and I'm going to increase this position, and then I'm going to multiply the 68 by the position. So when the first time I click it, it's going to go up to 1, and it's going to be 68. The second time I click it, it's going to be 136, and it's going to keep pulling it further and further and further. And this will actually work really well for our negatives as well, but if I click it once, now it works, and now it's pulling it further and further and further. Okay. What if it's negative, right? What if I want to move backwards? If I want to move backwards, well, I have two pieces of data that I'm passing into the function, so I have access to this data, right? If I didn't before, I would just have to add it into the on-click parameters of that function. And so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to say basically if it's positive, right? If it's forward, I'm going to do position plus plus, and if it's negative, if it's backwards, I'm going to do position minus minus, because basically I'm just going to multiply it by 1 less than what I should have multiplied it by to increase it, which would effectively move it back. So that's what I'm doing here in this if statement. And so again, if it's forward, I'm going to increase the position, and so it's going to not multiply it by, let's just pretend like it's 60. It's not going to get it to negative 120. Now it's, not going to stay at 60. Now it's going to get to negative 120 and then negative 180, right? But if I'm at 180 and I want to go backwards, now it's going to decrease it, multiply, 60 times 2, and now it's going to get us back to 120, right? So it's going to decrease that position. And so our offset is 68 times the position. And so this should work now, right? So if I go plus plus, I go back, it's going back, right? It's decreasing the position and then multiplying by that decreased value to get our new set of all our values. So plus plus plus. And if you can kind of see, you can kind of really kind of go over where you should. And let's see, why is backward not? Oh, and then backwards is not even going to go past it, because you're going to have a negative value. That's a little bit weird. We're going to keep trucking along, but I would have expected this backwards to kind of keep going back. But I guess if we keep subtracting from 0, we have an error. I don't know. Okay. I'm just gonna ignore it. It's working as intended. It's not a bug. It's a feature. But I wouldn't have expected it to do that. Oh well. All right. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add gutters. And so this is going to prevent us from going too far back and too far forward. So if our position is 3 while we're going in the movement or direction, I'm going to return false. And if our position is 0 while we're moving backwards, which this is already, our code is already doing this. So I don't know, maybe it's just good to have this for in case you know, the code's a little more readable. It makes more sense, but it is what it is. And so for backwards and over 0, we're not going to go any farther back. And yeah, okay. So that will prevent this forward movement, right? And that's it. I mean, that is literally a carousel, right? Now from here, you can change what's in the boxes. You can change how big this window is. What controls this window? Well, I have this border red. That's my carousel track. If I wanted to make my carousel track the size of basically one item, I'd make that 64 pixels. Now it's one item, and I can shimmy to 2 items. And if I don't like my offset, then I play with this number right here. I say, okay, that one offset a little, not enough. So let's do 70. And so now my offset is perfect. And so now I'm, shifting through these guys. And oh wait, I'm missing D and E. So let me change my position to 5, right? So now my maximum that I can get to is 5 items, right? So really, this is the scaffold of what a carousel is. If I wanted to include more items in my carousel, I would just play around with these values, and really that's all you need. If you want to be more clever and kind of guess what this offset needs to be based off of the things, you can do all that, but this is where it starts. All right, thanks for watching.